Fear Zone, your horror channel. Hello, good evening everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. Loro, and it happened to him in the city of Marechal Candido, which is in Brazil, and at that time, in 2001, Mr. Loro was still only a young man. And today, I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me at dawn when a strange creature, which to me was a werewolf, came to get something from my ranch, and this monster almost caused a tragedy. And it all starts like this. At that time, I was a teenager, and I lived with my parents in a rural area of my city, but I led a normal life, and sometimes helped my father in the delivery service he did in his truck, and also, I studied at school at night. But what happened at a certain time was that almost every day, a wanderer began to pass by my house, and this guy always carried a bag on his back, so I noticed that he would appear, sometimes at night, and during the day too, always walked towards a place where there was a vacant lot, and this stranger would disappear into this place, which was a dark thicket, and for me, he slept somewhere in the woods at night, because he went into the woods at night, and he would only appear in the daytime. Coming out of the woods. What happened once, however, was that my friends called me to pick mangoes in a field near our village, but I didn't go, and I stayed at home, because I had to do some work for my ranch. Then my friends went to the orchard. But as soon as almost 3 hours had passed, my friends came home and called me to give me some mangoes that they had picked. But the fact is that my friends had a strange bag with them, and they said that they had found that bag hidden in a mango tree that they had climbed. Well, these friends of mine used the bag to bring back more mangoes, but there were also some clothes in it, and strangely enough, some butcher's bones, and a bag of salt in a jar. At that moment, I remembered that wanderer who sometimes passed by my house, and I thought that this bag was his. So I told my colleagues to leave the bag with me, because I knew who owned it. So I ended up taking the bag, and I left it in the trunks of a tree in my backyard, so that when this wanderer came by, I would give it to him. But after all that, I went to school, and came home very late, and after a while I went to sleep. Anyway, at around 3 in the morning, I started to hear my dogs barking in the yard, and they were very nervous about something. Well, my 2 dogs were big and brave, and I doubted that any animal or person would have the courage to enter my property. Even so, I got out of bed and looked out of the window, but what I saw was that my dogs were in the backyard of my house, around the tree where I had hidden the wanderer's bag, and my animals were barking very angrily at something that was hidden up there, but as there was a lot of foliage on the branches of that tree, and I was far away, I couldn't see what was there on its trunks. Anyway, I went out of my room and got a piece of wood and went into my backyard and hid a good distance away from the tree to see what was going on. While I was looking around, I suddenly saw some branches swing and heard the sound of something falling from the tree, at which point I saw that it was the walker's bag, which I had left in the tree, that had fallen to the ground. I immediately thought that it was the walker who was up in the tree, as the branches were still moving, but my dogs kept barking at whatever was hidden in the tree. But it didn't take long, and I heard another noise of branches breaking, and suddenly, a black figure fell from the tree, and it was huge, and it seemed to be some kind of dangerous animal. This beast, it seemed to be some kind of dog-like animal, or a strange monkey. But in order not to be attacked by the dogs, it got up quickly from the ground, and stood on all fours, and in an attack position, my dogs moved away from the animal. Then this beast grabbed the bag with its mouth, and it started to run with a limp, and perhaps it was injured because of the fall it had taken from the tree, and even so, my 2 dogs went after this beast. I took advantage of this and followed this creature at a distance because I thought it might be a wolf, given the way it ran. But what happened was that this invading animal got close to the fence of the house and tried to get through, but the bag was stuck in the barbed wires, and this animal couldn't get through at all with that bag in its mouth. But while this creature couldn't get through the wires of the fence, the dog started fighting with this beast, and I went up to it to beat it up a bit. But when I got close to that animal, I noticed that it was bigger than I thought, and also my dogs, they started to get beaten up by this strange beast. I got scared, because this creature was very violent in this fight, so I hid behind a tree, so that this animal wouldn't see me, and I started to see what this creature was, and it wasn't any kind of animal that I had ever seen, because it was a very strange creature. At that moment, my legs stopped in fear at seeing what this creature looked like, because I saw that its eyes were lit up like lights, and that was really terrifying. The fact is that, after the dogs had been beaten by this creature, they kept barking at this beast from a distance, and I was hiding behind the tree, afraid that this animal would see me, and the bag was lying on the ground. At that moment, this creature started coughing, and it seemed to get sick, and to unbalance itself, and the strange thing is that this beast gave up on taking the bag, and quickly, it went under the barbed wire fence, and left my ranch. But then something happened. As the creature was close to the fence, that beast did something impossible. It crouched down on the ground, and tried to take the bag with its claws. I was amazed by the action of this animal, and I was frightened by it, because it was an animal with abnormal intelligence. But the creature didn't manage to take the bag, but at that time, the animal became ill again. However, to my surprise, the invading beast started moaning in pain and rolling on the ground. I took advantage of this and came out from behind the tree to see the beast, but at that moment, I looked at the creature again, and even though it was staggering, it stood up like a man, balancing on two legs. I didn't understand why the werewolf was running away. I took advantage of this moment, and I didn't wait. I took advantage of the fact that the werewolf was outside the fence of my house, and I ran to my house and locked the door. But anyway, I kept looking at the fence of my yard, and that werewolf had already disappeared. Well, at that point it was already 4 o'clock in the morning, and even so, I stayed up until dawn, afraid that the werewolf would come back and try to attack me again. But as soon as dawn broke, I went to walk around my yard, and I saw the bag that the werewolf had tried to take right there in my yard, so I threw that bag in the vacant lot near my house so that the werewolf wouldn't come back to my ranch. Then I went back to doing my daily chores at home. But at the end of the afternoon, I was in my backyard as usual, and that's when I saw that wanderer again, walking along a path in the vacant lot next to the house, and I stayed hidden watching him, but this suspect didn't see me, and to my surprise, the wanderer came close to the bag, and he stood there looking at the bag. This strange guy looked away, then he saw me and started to disguise himself. Then he turned back with a frightened look, and this guy started to walk with a limp on one leg, and disappeared into the woods, and didn't take his bag. I don't know what came over him, but to my surprise, the next day, I didn't see that bag on the ground anymore, and for me, it was the wanderer who came back hiding, and took the bag. But after that day, I never saw that guy again in my life, and the bag could only be the werewolf's for sure, because it had clothes and pieces of meat with bones, and salt inside the backpack, and the werewolf came after that backpack, and found it in my yard hidden in the tree, and at the time this creature was fighting with my dogs, he coughed, because the werewolf was coming back in the form of a man, and that was my luck, that this beast escaped. And you, what did you think of this story? Did this walker have something with the werewolf? Or did he really become that animal, and by the smell found his bag on top of my tree. At least for me, everything connects, because this guy was limping on his legs, and the werewolf, when he fell from the tree, also limped. And another thing I admired about the werewolf was his intelligence to try to get his bag with his claws. And that was my account that I spent with the werewolf. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you liked the story, subscribe to the Fear Zone channel and leave your like until the next real werewolf story. Fear Zone channel, your channel of terror. Good evening everyone, and now we go to the story of today, which is Mr. Myuu, and it happened to him in the city of Londrina, which is in the state of Paraná in Brazil. And at that time, which was in the year 2001, Mr. Myuu was 41 years old. And what I am going to tell you today is what happened to me a few years ago, when I found out that a creature stole something important from me, and I went after trying to recover it, but I ended up finding this creature. But before starting the story, please subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications to receive more content every week. Now, let's get to today's story. And it all starts like this. At that time I worked on a farm and lived on this property with my family, but what happened one night at my job is that I was doing a round by the farmyard, and when I got close to the pasture where some steers were in the corral, I looked at the animals and saw that a calf was missing. At that moment I was worried, and I looked for the animal around the property, but I couldn't find it. So, in order to avoid any problems with my boss about the disappearance of this calf, I decided to look for this animal in the bush, which was close to the property. So, I went home and got a rope to hold the calf if I found it, and I also took a flashlight to be able to find the animal, and I took my rifle too, because it could be a man or even a big animal that took my calf. After I got my hunting equipment, I went to the farm's fence and saw that one of the wooden fence posts was lying on the ground. Even so, I entered the very dark underbrush and walked for more than an hour through the forest looking for the calf and found nothing, and to make matters worse, the lantern's batteries ran out of power and the lantern turned off and the place became very dark, so I gave up looking for the calf. However, as I was walking through the dark vegetation, I was returning to the farm. Suddenly I heard a noise, and I crouched down in the bushes to see if it was I suddenly heard a noise, and crouched down in the bush to see if it was the calf, and hearing the sound, it sounded like the footsteps of an animal walking in the bush, and to me it was the calf I was looking for. However, I started walking slowly through the vegetation, and already with the rope in the form of a noose in my hands, and kept looking to see where he was, but suddenly the animal stopped walking, and when I saw quickly the shape of the animal in front of me, I didn't waste time. I threw the noose rope over the animal's head and managed to catch the animal, but to my surprise and looking closer, I saw that figure was not my calf. It was a strange animal, resembling a kind of large, deformed dog. This creature began to try to run, because he was scared. I saw that this animal was dangerous, so I let go of the rope and hid in the bush, and the beast ran behind some trees, with the rope around its neck. I stayed down and hid in the bush, just looking in the direction of that beast, and decided to stay still, so that it wouldn't chase me and come after me. So while I was looking at that creature, I saw that he, even on 4 legs, this creature was sticking one of his hands inside the rope and trying to get the rope that was tied around his neck, but he couldn't do it. But this beast kept looking in my direction, where I was hiding, and it seemed that this beast could smell me with his pharaoh, and he started to suspect that there was someone hiding nearby. The fact is, this beast was not a known animal, and his face was kind of like a monkey's face, but also, he was kind of like a dog. The biggest amazement was the kind of glow that this beast had in his eyes, because they were lit like lights. This beast seemed to be a hairy demon. And this animal was much bigger than any large dog. I stayed quiet in the hidden bush, and would not risk running, but kept my rifle pointed in the creature's direction, and if it found me and tried to attack me, I would shoot. However, I only had 2 rounds left in my rifle, and if I missed I might get caught by this creature, so I decided to wait for the beast to leave. Well, at some point this beast did something incredible, for as this monster could not get the rope off his neck with his claws, suddenly to my amazement, this beast stood up, and stood like a man, balancing on 2 legs. Then he managed to use his 2 claw hands, and managed to get the rope off his neck, and I no longer had any doubt that this creature was a werewolf. I kept watching this beast, and I saw that it got back on all 4s, and it left the place, and started walking and looking at the bush, where I was hiding, but this werewolf went away suspicious of something. At this instant, I took advantage that the werewolf moved away, and started walking quietly through the woods, and after 15 minutes walking through the vegetation, I arrived near the farm where I worked, but when I looked back, I saw this werewolf was hiding behind some bushes, and this beast stayed put, to try to catch me by surprise, and as this monster was very close to me and chasing me, and I couldn't run, because he would catch me on the run. Even though I couldn't see the werewolf right, so I pointed my gun in his direction, and shot this werewolf, who was hiding behind the bushes, and it ran into the underbrush, standing up, and growling with rage and rage. I was very scared, but I took advantage and ran, and this time I did not even want to know if the werewolf was after me or not, and continued running. Soon I arrived at the farm and got more ammunition. Then I was watching the farm through the window of the house, if that creature would appear here, because he was near the property, but passing the hours, thank goodness that this werewolf did not appear. I waited for dawn well into the day, and already in the morning, I called one of the farm helpers. I went with him to look for the calf, which disappeared at dawn, but I took my rifle, not to be surprised on the way. After walking through the undergrowth for 10 minutes, we arrived near where I had snared the werewolf with the rope, but I saw a walker passing by this place, and he carried a shovel in his hands, which is a tool for digging holes in the ground. I found this strange and wondered what this man was doing with that tool in his hands over there, but this suspect saw me, and he went into the undergrowth and disappeared. But as soon as I arrived where I had seen the werewolf at dawn, I noticed that the earth on the ground near there was moving, and I found this very strange, and started digging the ground there with my hands. After digging some dirt out of the ground, I saw that my calf was buried there, and looking closely at what killed the animal, I could see the marks, that the calf was killed with several bites from some ferocious beast, and for sure it was the werewolf that killed it. Well, from this I thought that this strange fellow had something to do with my buried calf. I wanted to go after the suspect guy, but my friend wouldn't let me, for he told me that this man only buried animals, and if he was the culprit, he would have stolen the animal to eat its meat, and not to bury it. I went back to the farm, and ended up buying another calf for my boss, so that he wouldn't notice that his animal was missing. After a few days, I even began to imagine that the guy who buried the calf in the woods had something to do with the werewolf, because I think he was trying to hide the evidence of the creature's attack, or he could be the werewolf that I caught on the rope. Thank you all for watching the video, and if you like the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave your like to receive new videos every week. Until next time. And if you want to see other stories of werewolves captured, or werewolves imprisoned, or also hunting and being hunted, and other werewolf stories, I'll leave the cards from 2 very good videos here on the screen.